Xbox's first big release of 2025 is here. Avowed is finally out today, and I have put in over 50 hours in the game, hitting level 28, pretty much doing everything the game has to offer, including pretty much all the side quests and all the collectibles. But it was rough going there in the very beginning because I almost dropped this game in the first 10 hours and deleted it. But eventually I became quite addicted. What is going on, everybody? This is Randall Thor 19, the man with the million, back again with another video. Hope everybody's doing well. Do me a big favor, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because today we are talking about my feelings, my review for Avowed, which is out today or early access in a couple hours and available on Day 1 Game Pass and everywhere on February 18th. Now, I do got to give a big shout out to Xbox and Obsidian for sending over the review code so I could play the game and gather my thoughts about it. And I do have a lot to say, and I am probably just gonna ramble on about, there are things in this game that I absolutely 100% love that made me want to get on my Xbox every single night and play for 6 hours at a time, but there are other parts of the game that just didn't really hit the mark. Now, for those of you that don't know, have been living underneath a rock, Avowed is the latest old school RPG from one of the premier RPG studios in the entire industry, Obsidian. And I think everybody's wondering, did Obsidian cook with this game? Right? In the past, they had a Game of the Year nomination with The Outer Worlds back in 2019. They put out the indie hit Pentiment, which got a whole bunch of awards and reviewed very highly. And people also really enjoyed Grounded, which was their take on the survival genre. So now we're coming back to the Pillars of Eternity universe in the type of game that Obsidian is known for. Now, you basically start out the game, you make your character, you can make it look like whatever you want, and then you can add or subtract some points to the different skill sets in the game. Like maybe you want more intelligence to have more magic essence points. Maybe you figure, you know what, I'm gonna run sword and board, so I want my character to be a beastly tank, so you would put more points into the might category, increasing your damage output. And the game starts off and you're an envoy. The Emperor of the Idaean Empire has sent you to the Living Lands because of this mysterious plague that is sweeping through the area, and it's your job to kind of find out what is happening with it and to eradicate the plague. I didn't really care too much for the story, it's just okay. But what I did love about this game, and I use the word love because I became super addictive to it. I mean, I played the game for more than 50 hours. So I'm gonna start off with what I think Avowed does the best. Look, I'm gonna be honest with everybody, as I always am. After playing initially for the first 5 to 8 hours, I didn't like this game at all. I really thought about just turning the game off on my second night of playing and deleting the game and thinking to myself, you know what? I'm not gonna make a video about this because I do not like this game. It didn't grab me in any way. Like the characters and the dialogue and what was going on with the story and the introduction in the tutorial island, it didn't connect with me in any meaningful way, and I didn't want to continue on. However, the game got progressively better. Combat is a standout in this game. Now, it wasn't in the beginning, but when you actually start earning more points so you can put in the different abilities and sort of choose how you want to play and you get different weapons, that's when the game started to shine. When I decided I'm not going to follow all the icons that the map has. Like, you can go into each of these cities and you can find different side quests and bounties in the main quest, and you'll have the map littered with, hey, you should go here and do this. I went exploring and I absolutely had a blast. That is Avowed at its best when you take the combat that the game has, and it's very freeform, right? There's a lot of different weapons you can use, whether it's a sword by itself or maybe a shield, a spear, a hammer, a two-handed hammer, a two-handed sword, a wand, a book of spells. There's tons of different options available to you in the combat. And once I found what I liked, which was getting my Harry Potter on, so I had a wand in my right hand and I had my book of spells in my left. And I was just going around damaging people at a distance with my wand while casting really cool spells with this grimoire book, right? I would throw ice from my fingertips, or call down a blizzard into an area, or shoot fire from my hand, or perhaps a fireball. And the game gives you the option of having a second loadout. So if enemies started to get close, I would switch to my sword and my shield. And even though I wasn't a fan of how the game started off originally with the combat, but by the end, oh man, I really got into it. The sword and shield combat, especially when I unlocked the parry ability in the ranger tree. Because anytime you level up in this game, you can spend a point in the wizard tree, the ranger tree, or the warrior tree. And you can sort of mix and match your builds. Maybe you want to go all wizard and put stuff in that tree. Maybe you want to be a warrior and put stuff all in that tree. Or maybe you just do it like I did. A mixture of a bunch of points in ranger and a mixture of a bunch of points in wizard. And if it doesn't work for you, if you feel like that's not the right way, you can reset your points at any point in time. You know, maybe you find a better weapon. You're not really digging the wand. You want to use a pistol? You want to use a two-handed long rifle? You can do that as well. I really love the freeform combat in this game. And when you take those elements of the combat and you combine it with the exploration that the game offers, because even though this game isn't truly open world where it's like one giant map, it's condensed down into these open hub worlds, which there are 4 main ones, but they're very dense. There's a lot of things in a small area. So while you will come across a group of enemies and you'll get into a fight and you'll pick up their loot, you'll notice in the distance there might be a ruined tower. So you head over there, you parkour up. There's a lot of verticality in this game. So the sprinting and then jumping at a ledge to pull yourself up, the animations, that stuff never got old. You mantle up the thing, and then you'll start to hear this kind of chime, which tells you that there is a chest really close. It could be a blue chest, could be a purple chest, a legendary chest, and those chests can give you anything from new weapons, unique weapons, which always have some really cool perks on them, crafting materials and that stuff, but the exploration aspect, and I'm gonna use this comparison, and I really shouldn't, but I think it's a game most people know and have played, and was hailed for it, is Elden Ring. Now, I'm not saying this game is as good as Elden Ring, because it's not, but the exploration of just kind of moving around and uncovering things on my own, it really gave me those Elden Ring vibes. One minute you're descending into a tomb that looks absolutely incredible with the lighting in this game, especially in specific instances like this. You'll see the areas kind of overrun with plant life, and they all kind of glow in the dark. The game has this day-night cycle in the open worlds. I'd prefer it when it was nighttime. I thought maybe the world didn't look as good during the day, so I always kind of liked it when it turned to night. But you descend these tombs, maybe you run into a bounty. Oh my god, it's a big, huge boss with a huge health bar. I'm not sure I'll be able to beat it. And the next minute, you're in this camp fighting all these different enemies. Next one, you find a unique weapon that was part of a treasure map quest that you never even found. Or maybe a piece of the totems that you can put together in camp. It's that exploration combined with the combat that kept me coming back night after night after night to keep on playing, to keep on exploring, to see what the game world offered. I love that aspect of this game. Now, I just mentioned it in my whole rambling speech about why I was addicted to this game and the reason I played it for over 50 hours doing everything. But you got to talk about how the game looks. I think it looks great. There are 3 different modes to play it on your Xbox Series X, which is how I played it. You can play it in visual mode, which is 4K 30 with ray tracing on, and you can unlock the frame rate in all these modes. Balance mode is 4K at 40 frames with ray tracing, and performance mode is 1800p with 60 FPS, but no ray tracing. So I decided to play in performance mode, and I will say sometimes the frame rate would drop, especially in the bigger cities, around a lot of characters in the cities, and most of the time in fights, the frame rate would be solid, but you definitely notice some drops when there was a lot of enemies on screen, but for the most part, I felt it held up pretty well, considering that the game looks great, especially when you're out there in the environment, just looking at all the different vegetation, and then seeing the transition from day to night when the mushrooms and everything start to glow. It was really cool, how the game looks. That's not to say I didn't run into any sort of issues, because I did. There was kind of a lot of white noise within individual rooms sometimes, which I think was only really in the 60 FPS mode. That's the mode I pretty much played exclusively on. It didn't really bother me because but it was definitely noticeable. And I don't know how to classify this one, because I didn't really have any bugs in the game. All the quests worked perfectly for me. Everything, that the enemies dropped on the ground that you needed to pick up, I was always able to get. So I didn't have any of that stuff. I think there was one time where a book I was supposed to pick up for a quest didn't spawn, so I had to turn the game off and reload it, and then it did spawn. But one of the things I will say that happened, I'm not sure it was a bug or just a thing of the game, was when you have your dialogue with other characters, and we'll talk about this in a second, they'll show the character talking to you, they might pan to yourself, and they might pan to other characters if they have something to add. It didn't happen a lot, but when it did happen, it was noticeable. One of the characters would always be rendered in 30 frames, and it's very jarring because you might see one character in 30, and then your character is clearly 60 FPS, and then the other character is clearly 60 FPS. So that happened enough where I was like, okay, is this supposed to happen? Is this a bug? So just keep that in mind. Now, I mentioned how this is an old school RPG. So a lot of the game is going to be dialogue, and making choices, which definitely at least seems the illusion of consequences. You're going to be talking to a lot of people. You're going to be listening to a lot of dialogue. And I think for the very most part, the dialogue's pretty good. And the voice acting is really good in a lot of cases, especially with your companions, because they're going to be with you throughout pretty much the entire game. You have 4 companions. You have Kai, Marius, Giada, and Yatzil, and they'll go along with you in your journey throughout the game. You can have 2 of them with you at any point in time. So I either would have Kai and Marius, I would have Kai and Giada, or Kai and Yatzil. And you're probably wondering, why is it always Kai and another character? That's because Kai's voice actor is the same from Garrus in the Mass Effect trilogy. So I was like, oh great, I have Garrus in my fantasy RPG. I'm going to take him everywhere. And I sure did. He's a great character. And all the companions' voice acting is pretty damn good. The game does allow you to be like, your knight in shining armor. Everything's good. Your Paragon role, essentially. But the game also lets you sort of be a sarcastic asshole. There's a lot of different variations in the dialogue choices that you can say to other people. And every single main fight in the game, you can talk your way out of if you choose the right dialogue, if you meet the right skill checks, because whenever you level up, you get a point to spend in your ability tree, but also a point to spend in your character tree, which can increase your perception or your might or your dexterity and any of that stuff. And sometimes in those conversations, you'll have extra dialogue. To say this thing here, you need 2 points in your dexterity to be able to say this. And there's also your whole background itself. I think you can choose between one of 5 different backgrounds. I was an arcane scholar, so a lot of my additional dialogue was tailored that way, but you could be like a war hero and all that stuff that always presents different reactions from people and different dialogue. We talk about choice and consequence because that's kind of what the foundation of this game really is. Everything's supposed to matter. And, like I said, you can pretty much talk your way out of any fight. Or you can fight. There'll always be an option to attack if you want to. So it's like the combat. Like, you can play the game however you want. You're not locked into just only playing as a ranger or a wizard. Or, hey, you know what? I'm stuck with just the sword because that's what I invested in. And it's the same thing here with your choices. You want to be an asshole and just run ramp shot through the living lands killing everybody? You could do that. You want to be Mr. Goody Two-Shoes and talk your way out of it? You can do that as well. So I appreciated that. But sometimes it did feel like the consequences of the game were more just dialogue and not actually something real. For instance, there are some major choices you make in the game. You'll sit there and stare at your screen and think, oh man, I don't know what the right one is to do. And they'll give you the option to be like, hey, Kai, what do you think? What should I do? And Kai will give his opinion. Now, there are a couple instances where I asked my companions for what I should do, and they're like, oh, you cannot do this. But I did it anyways. And it ended up being that, like, Kai was super mad at me Marius was super pissed off, and I felt like, oh, I did it. I'm gonna pay the consequences here. One of these characters is gonna leave my crew, and I'm not gonna have them anymore. But it never did. It's just that they'll give you a verbal tongue lashing, and they'll be really, really mad at you for a few minutes, and then the next time you talk to them, everything's sort of okay, and they might bring things up a little bit later on, but it sort of seems like, and that they are sort of seeing your side of it a little bit. So I'm not really sure if there's true consequences in the game. I did talk to a couple people who made opposite choices to me, and it didn't really seem to matter. But then I did talk to somebody else who had his entire crew leave him at the end of the game. So it's just something that I didn't come across, and it really felt like the choice and consequences was more like, do I want to fight this boss, yes or no? Now, another big part of the game that is directly tied to the combat that you're going to be doing a lot of, although maybe you can go a different way, and I'll explain in a minute, is the upgrading. Because all the enemies you come across, they don't scale to your level. They are set at a level. So when you see a group of enemies, and some of their names might be highlighted in blue, but then another set of enemies might be highlighted in purple with the skull, those are directly correlated to the quality level of your weapons. So you can't just get a weapon and continue to use it, because you need to upgrade it with all the materials you find in the world. So your blue wand is not really going to do too much damage to a purple enemy. You need to upgrade that blue wand to a purple wand. And there'll be context clues. You'll run into enemies, you use your wand, and if you're using a blue wand against a purple enemy, it makes this weird sound, and your teammates, your companions will be like, your weapon's not going to do much damage. And vice versa for your armor. If you have blue armor and you're going up against an enemy that's purple, you're going to take more damage because of that. So you got to keep up with your upgrades. If you really found a sword, a unique sword that you like, which I did, it's on fire, it does fire damage, I pretty much used it throughout the whole game. You want to keep up upgrading it to at least match the level of the enemies. Now, you don't have to do that. You collect all these weapons and these new things. You can sell them to any merchants, and each area, the merchants will sell progressively better gear to match the level of the enemies in each area. So you can either upgrade the ones that you currently have and like, or buy new ones every single level. And the way you upgrade your abilities is in the party camp, which is another big aspect of the game. You notice these big green crystals spread throughout the map, and you go up to them and you can set up a party camp, which is an area where you could do a whole bunch of different stuff, like talk to your companions, because after each main quest and certain side quests, you can talk to all your different companions and, ask them questions like, how did you feel about what just happened? Ask them about themselves and their personal history. And that's always super interesting, just sitting back and listening to them tell you about the world and why they're here and what they're fighting for. But it's also more than that. It's where you can actually cook all the different types of foods and potions that will heal you or give you more essence from the different items and stuff you scavenge from the world. And that's also where you can upgrade all your equipment. It'll be like, hey, if you want to upgrade this wand to purple, you're going to need 4 branches and, 3 mushrooms. And every tier requires more and more until you move up a quality level, and then the upgrades will require a different set of material that will be found in the next biome. So it kind of keeps on rolling along. Like, all the stuff you'll find in the first area will be good enough to upgrade your weapons from blue to purple, and then you'll have to move on to the next area to upgrade your weapons to purple to red, stuff like that. Or you just don't have to do it, as long as you're buying new weapons in each area that correspond to the level of the enemies. Now, I've talked at length about the things I really liked about this game. The exploration of uncovering secrets and all the areas of the map without being led by hand to do certain things. It's just there's something about seeing a structure in the distance, getting to it, and then finding a legendary chest with some items, or in fact running into a gigantic boss that you had no idea was there. In fact, in the second area of the game, I went and explored the entire map before I even went to do the main story, and I had stumbled across one of the bosses you're supposed to fight during the main story early on in the second map, because I was just like, wait a minute, what is that grove over there? Let me go check it out. Well, wait a minute, who is this boss that is basically destroying me? I really like that. And how the combat just remains cool and awesome throughout, and it doesn't lock you into any sort of thing. If you want to use a wand with the pistol, go right ahead. If you want to use a two-handed hammer, go ahead. Whatever works for you. Those are the things that kept me moving with Avowed. And the stuff that really didn't, and I'm not saying it's bad by any stretch of the imagination, it's not. And maybe it's because I didn't know anything about the Pillars of Eternity universe going into it, but they throw a lot of terms at you. At the beginning, you basically have like all this stuff. They're just talking to you about the different lore, the different political structures of the game, and it's kind of just went over my head a little bit. Luckily, there is an interesting thing that I'm not sure I've ever seen in a game before. So when you're talking to people, you'll notice that you can toggle the subtitles on right there, which is a great accessibility change, because I couldn't tell you how many times I actually did that because I didn't understand or couldn't hear properly a certain character and what they were saying, but also this like dialogue, lore, and history. So anytime a character will stop talking, you can press X, and it will give you the history of your conversation and also words and what they actually mean within the Pillars of Eternity universe, which I thought was really cool. But the thing that I'm not going to say I didn't like, but it didn't live up to, I don't know, how do I say this exactly properly? When I was playing through the game and exploring, not a single time did I ever feel compelled or wonder what the next story beat was. I was happy in my own bubble, exploring the game at my own leisure, getting into combat, and having a blast doing that, and I did not care one single bit about the main story whatsoever. And I really think by the end, when you get through everything, sure, there's some interesting choices you have to make, but I don't really think those choices really have any true consequences at all, really, until perhaps the end of the game. It was just there. The story was just okay to good, but it wasn't something that I was dying to get back to see it all unfold. Like, I was just having so much fun uncovering side quests in the world, which there are some pretty damn dark side quests with some pretty dark dialogue trees that you can get into, especially the companion quest with Marius. Man, that is some really screwed up stuff that he went through. But yeah, like the story aspects of the game just didn't click with me in any way, shape, or form. And maybe it will if you're, I don't know, like if these old school RPGs are more your thing. Because even with that, your main character is not voiced. And I'm not docking the game because of that, but I feel that the game could have taken the next step if it was, because there's some really cool dialogue choices that you can use and you can say to someone else. And I feel like it would have been better served if I could hear a professional voice actor say those words with humor or with that tinge of an I'm an asshole or any sort of emotion. And instead, it's just dialogue on the screen, and it really doesn't mean anything to me. And I think that's a me problem. It's going to matter to each one of you differently than how it matters to me. I'm just giving you my opinion of how I felt about Avowed. So we've come to the end, and I know you're probably wondering what my score is, and it's an interesting thing because if you'd asked me in the first 5 to 6, 7, 8 hours, I would have said it was a 5 or a 6. And I was debating whether or not to even continue. I thought about deleting the game off my hard drive, but I found my groove. I really enjoyed the exploration and the combat, so much so that it carried me throughout the 50-hour experience. And even though I like the choice and consequences of being able to talk yourself out of a fight or just attack if you want to, I didn't really feel compelled by the main story to ever wonder what was going to happen and feel like I need to see the resolution of these things. So with that said, I'm going to give the game an 8. Nothing higher and nothing lower. I sat there and I thought about it. I thought about maybe giving it a 7.5, but man, there were like 4 days in a row there where I could not wait to get on and just explore the world that Obsidian had made. So I'm going to give the game an 8. I'd recommend it if you're an RPG lover. If you got Game Pass, it's definitely worth checking out. The game looks great. It performs pretty well for the most part, outside of a few nitpicks here and there. I think you'll enjoy the combat and the exploration just as much as I did. And, you know, perhaps if you're a huge Pillars of Eternity guy and all the lore and aspects that the game has that I kind of just went over my head, you might like this and think this is a 9 or a 10. But for me, it's an 8. and I think it is definitely worth checking out. Anyways, guys, that's my video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you for taking the time here today to check out the video, and we'll see you in the next one. Later.